A 10-year-old boy looked into the eyes of the most powerful man in the world and said, "No." What happened next changed everything. This isn't just a story of courage. It's the story of how a few whispered words in a Nairobi hospital became a cry for dignity that echoed across the world. But to understand that moment, we need to go back 3 years. We need to understand who Colonel James Mangi was and why 2 careless words from an American president cut him so deeply they would shape his grandson's destiny forever. January 11th, 2018, inside the White House. Donald Trump made remarks about immigration. His words, directed at Haiti and African nations, traveled thousands of miles like stray bullets. For millions, they were an insult. For one man, they were betrayal. Colonel James Mangi was 70 years old. Sitting in his modest Nairobi home, watching the evening news with a cup of hot chai, something he had done every night for decades. That evening, the world collapsed around him. James wasn't just another man. He was a decorated war veteran. He had fought in the 1977 war with Somalia, served in Rwanda during the 1994 genocide, and joined peacekeeping missions alongside American troops. In Somalia, 1993, he saved the lives of 4 U.S. soldiers when their convoy was ambushed. Shrapnel from a grenade left metal in his leg, a pain he carried for the rest of his life. On his wall hung medals, commendations, even a signed photograph from President Bill Clinton thanking him for his courage and service. Yet on that January night, watching the broadcast, James felt as if he had been shot not in the body, but in the soul. His grandson, Kofi, just 7, was playing with toy soldiers on the floor when he heard an unfamiliar sound, his grandfather crying. The strongest man he knew, broken. "Grandpa, why are you crying?" James tried to hide his tears, but the pain was too deep. He lifted Kofi onto his lap. "Do you know why my leg hurts when it rains?" "Because of the metal inside," Kofi answered softly. "That metal is from Somalia when I saved American soldiers. 4 men with families. I helped them return home, and now their president calls my country a whole." Kofi didn't understand politics, but he understood pain. He saw the wound no medicine could heal. That night was the beginning of the end. Over the next 3 years, James slowly faded. His body weakened, his heart gave way, not just to age, but to sadness. Before his health collapsed, he took Kofi to the Hope of Africa orphanage, not because he didn't love him, but because he loved him too much to deny him a future. He still visited every weekend, teaching his grandson about history, about their proud Maasai ancestors, about dignity. "Never forget, Kofi, you come from kings. Dignity is not hatred. Dignity is remembering who you are." By 2025, James's health failed. In the hospital, connected to tubes and machines, he called for Kofi. The boy rushed from the orphanage, still in his school uniform, to find his grandfather weak but smiling. Then came the news. The President of the United States would visit Nairobi. Children from local orphanages were chosen to greet him. Kofi's name was on the list. James pulled his grandson close. "Tomorrow, you'll meet the man who broke my heart. When he stands before you, remember who you are. We Mangis are descendants of warriors who never bowed, never sold their dignity. Promise me, Kofi. Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel less than what you are." "I promise." "Grandpa." James smiled, and for a moment, Kofi saw the warrior again, the protector, the hero. James's hands trembled as he reached for his neck. Beneath the hospital gown hung a golden chain Kofi had seen all his life but never really noticed. "I've worn this for more than 50 years, James whispered, fumbling with the clasp. "Since 1978, the day I received this medal." At last he freed it. In his fragile hands rested a golden medal glowing under the hospital lights, the Kenyan Cross of Valor, the nation's highest military honor. "I didn't earn this for killing or conquering," James said, his voice breaking. "I earned it for saving lives, for choosing compassion over destruction." He slipped the chain around Kofi's neck. The medal felt heavy, still warm from his grandfather's body. "This medal has been with me in every battle, every peace mission, every hard choice. It reminds me to do what's right, even when it's not easy." Kofi touched it, feeling not just its weight but its history, the heartbeat of his family now resting against his chest. "Now it's yours," James said. "Carry it proudly. Remember, true strength isn't in weapons or muscles. It's here." He touched Kofi's heart. "And here." He touched his forehead. "Grandpa, I can't take this." "It's yours." "It was mine," James replied softly. "Now it's yours. One day you'll give it to your grandson and tell him these same stories." That night, Kofi slept beside him, the metal pressing against his chest like his grandfather's heart still beating next to his own. At 3:47 a.m. on May 18, 2025, the steady hum of machines changed. Not alarms, a single flat tone. Kofi opened his eyes. His grandfather was looking right at him. "Kofi," he whispered, barely a breath. "I'm here, Grandpa. Remember your promise. And remember, I love you more than my life." "I love you too, Grandpa." James smiled faintly, then closed his eyes for the last time. The flat beep filled the room. Colonel James Mangi was gone. Kofi sat motionless long after the nurses turned off the machines. His hand gripped the metal beneath his shirt. A part of him felt torn away, yet another part felt stronger, burdened with purpose. His grandfather had left him more than a medal. He had left him a mission. The funeral came 2 days later at Uhuru National Cemetery. Hundreds gathered, limping veterans, politicians with speeches, ordinary people who remembered the colonel's courage. Kofi sat in the front row, wearing the black suit his grandfather had given him for graduation. The metal gleamed over his white shirt in the African sun. The next morning, May 19, 2025, Kofi woke at the orphanage knowing his life had changed. He dressed carefully, his reflection in the mirror no longer that of a 10-year-old boy, but of someone carrying generations of history. The metal shone on his chest like a small sun. Outside, Nairobi stirred under heavy security. Sirens wailed. Helicopters thumped overhead. Soldiers lined the streets and barricades cut off the main roads. The city seemed to hold its breath. At 10 a.m., school buses escorted by police arrived at the orphanage. The children were taken with the solemnity of a procession to the Kenyatta International Convention Center, transformed into a fortress of steel, glass, and armed guards. Inside, American Secret Service agents moved like predators, scanning every corner. One of them noticed the metal on Kofi's chest, and just for a moment, his hardened expression softened with respect. A protocol officer gave final instructions. "Line up, shake hands, smile, and say, 'Welcome to Kenya, Mr. President.'" Kofi raised his hand. "What if someone doesn't want to shake his hand?" The officer froze. That would be an insult to the United States. A diplomatic disaster, but that won't happen. "Right?" Kofi only nodded. The weight of the metal pressed against his chest. His grandfather's voice echoed in his mind. "Your heart will tell you what to do." At 12:30 p.m., Donald Trump entered alongside President Uhuru Kenyatta. Applause thundered, cameras flashed, the world watched. Trump moved down the line of children, his smile mechanical, his eyes fixed on the cameras rather than the kids. To him, they were props, not people. When he reached Marcus, child number 17, the boy's radiant smile faded as Trump brushed him off. Then came Kofi. Trump extended his hand, expecting the same ritual. But Kofi didn't move. His arms stayed at his sides. The hall froze. The silence was deafening. "Come on, kid," Trump muttered, low but firm. "Don't be shy." Kofi met his eyes, steady and unblinking. Trump's smile vanished. For the first time, he really looked at one of the children. In the silence, Kofi's voice carried like thunder. "I won't shake hands with a man who called the place where my grandfather died defending Africa's dignity a whole country." Gasps rippled through the hall. Cameras swung toward him. Agents stiffened. Diplomats paled. Trump stood frozen, his hand still extended. His expression flickered between disbelief, anger, and something else. Respect, perhaps. Kofi calmly unbuttoned his shirt, revealing the metal shining like a sun under the lights. And in that moment, the promise to his grandfather lived on. The hall fell silent. Kofi held up the metal, his voice steady. "This belonged to my grandfather, Colonel James Mangi." Trump looked at it and something shifted in his eyes. "He died 3 days ago," Kofi continued, his voice breaking but firm. At Kenyatta National Hospital, May 15th at 3:47 a.m., tubes in his throat. Machines keeping his heart alive for the last time. Not from war wounds. Not from the shrapnel in his leg since Somalia. Not from the nightmares of Rwanda. He died with a broken heart, knowing that the president of the country he fought beside called his home garbage. A Kenyan soldier in the back wept loudly. Others followed. My grandfather told me about the day he saved 4 American soldiers in Mogadishu. He remembered their faces, their names, their families. One of them had a daughter my age, Sarah. Wonder if she knows she's alive because a man from a so-called whole country decided her life was worth more than his. Oh, no more soldiers, Kenyan and American, cried openly. An African-American veteran stood at attention and saluted Kofi, tears on his cheeks. Kofi's voice cut through the silence. Before he died, my grandfather grabbed my hand. He told me, "Never let them make you feel less. We are descendants of kings, not slaves, children of Africa, not a—" Trump laughed softly. "You're wise beyond your years. Would you come to the White House? I want to meet you properly. Only if I can bring all my brothers and sisters from the orphanage. All 27, all of them. They're my family. You know what, kid? You're right. They're all invited." 2 weeks later, the children flew to Washington on a private plane. At the White House, the atmosphere was entirely different. No cameras, no showmanship. Trump sat with each child listening to their dreams. He smiled when Amara showed her drawings. He sat on the floor to play a Kenyan game with the youngest. When he reached Kofi, the two locked eyes. This time, Trump extended his hand. Kofi shook it. "What changed?" Trump asked. "You did. And when someone truly changes, we honor that." That day, Trump announced a $500 million initiative for African education. More importantly, in the Rose Garden, he issued a public apology. 6 months ago, a boy taught me a lesson. My words about Africa were wrong, morally wrong. Africa is not made of whole countries. It is home to some of the most resilient, courageous, and inspiring people on earth. People like Colonel James Mangi. People like his grandson, Kofi. Kofi was invited to speak. My grandfather taught me that forgiveness is not weakness, it is strength. True leadership is not about never making mistakes. It is about admitting them and choosing to be better. Today I forgive the words that hurt my grandfather, but more importantly, I honor the actions that show growth. That's what defines a person. The world listened. Before leaving Washington, the children visited the National Museum of African American History and Culture, where a new exhibition had been unveiled. Dignity in Action. The story of Kofi Mangi and the power of saying no. Inside was Colonel Mangi's medal, the video of that unforgettable moment, and the ripple of change it set into motion. They chose dignity over convenience. When the children returned to Kenya, the world had already shifted. The Kofi effect had sparked dignity movements across continents. In India, Dalit students marched for educational equality. In Brazil, indigenous peoples defended ancestral lands in court and won. In the United States, students built organizations to fight racism in schools. Across Europe, African immigrants united against job discrimination. The message was clear and universal. Dignity is not negotiable. Everyone has the power to say no when it matters. That night in Nairobi, Kofi sat beneath the ancient baobab tree with Marcus, Amara, and the others. "Do you think your grandfather would be proud?" Amara asked. Kofi touched the metal under his shirt. Its golden surface still carried his grandfather's warmth. "He wouldn't just be proud," Kofi said softly. "He'd be amazed." "Amazed? Why?" Marcus leaned forward. "Because he taught me never to feel less. But he never told me I could help others feel more, that a single choice could inspire millions to find their voice." Marcus smiled. "So what do we do now?" Kofi gazed up at the African night sky. Constellations glittering like diamonds on velvet. "We grow. We study with all our strength. We'll be doctors, teachers, engineers, artists, leaders. And when we have children and grandchildren, we'll pass down the same lesson my grandfather gave me." "What lesson?" Several children asked at once. "That no matter who you are, where you come from, or how small you seem, your dignity is not for sale. Your worth cannot be bargained away. And never, never let anyone make you feel less than what you are." The wind stirred through the branches of the 200-year-old baobab, the same wind that had watched Maasai hunters roam the plains, the same wind that had carried civilizations into history. Beneath the eternal stars, the orphans understood. They were part of something greater. Heirs to a noble story, authors of their own future. And never again would they let anyone make them feel small. 10 years later, May 18, 2035. Kofi Mangi stood at the podium of the United Nations Security Council in New York, the youngest speaker in history to address it. At 21, a Harvard senior on full scholarship, he still wore his grandfather's medal, now dulled with age but heavier with meaning. He began simply, "Honorable delegates, my name is Kofi Mangi. 10 years ago when I was a boy, I learned the most powerful word in any language is not yes, it's no. And today I'm here to speak about why the world needs more people willing to say no. To injustice, no to indignity, no to the belief that power grants the right to disrespect." In the gallery, Mrs. Wanjiku, now 65 and director of a network of orphanages, wept with pride. Beside her sat Marcus, now an MIT engineering student, Amara studying art in Paris, and other children grown into professionals. In the front row, an empty chair bore a plaque, in memory of Colonel James Mangi, 1951 to 2025. He taught that dignity has no age, and courage requires no power. Kofi's voice grew stronger. The crises we face, climate change, inequality, conflict, all share one cause. Too many people said yes when they should have said no. Yes to greed. Yes to indifference. Yes to treating human beings as less. He touched the metal. My grandfather died heartbroken because someone in power once called entire nations garbage. But his death was not in vain, because his story inspires others to defend human dignity. That is all we truly own, our dignity. We cannot always control what others do to us, but we can control how we respond. We cannot control the power others hold, but we can control whether we keep or sell our soul. The chamber was silent. Honorable delegates, your decisions shape the lives of millions. Children like me who look to you to build a world where dignity is respected, where differences are celebrated, where power lifts instead of crushes. Remember my grandfather's words. Never let them make you feel less. But don't stop there. Help others feel more. Use power not to divide, but to unite. Not to humiliate, but to elevate. When he finished, the applause lasted more than 5 minutes. But what touched him most was a little girl in the gallery. She couldn't have been more than 8, her eyes shining with admiration. "Is it true?" she whispered when they met. "When you were my age, you said no to the President of the United States?" "It's true," Kofi said. "Weren't you afraid?" "I was terrified. But being brave doesn't mean not being afraid. It means doing what's right despite the fear. Do you think I could be brave like you?" "You already are," he told her. "Never let anyone make you feel less than you are, in their own dignity." The Kofi effect had evolved beyond what anyone could have predicted. Universities worldwide offered courses on moral resistance in the modern era. The Colonel James Mangi Foundation, established with donations that followed the incident, had built 47 schools in Africa and scholarships for over 10,000 students. Marcus, his orphanage brother, had become the aerospace engineer he always dreamed of being and now directed a program that brought telescopes to rural African schools. "Kofi taught me to reach for the stars," he always said, and the Kofi effect grew into something no one could have imagined. Universities across the world began teaching courses on moral resistance in the modern age. The Colonel James Mangi Foundation, built from donations after the incident, created 47 schools in Africa and scholarships for more than 10,000 students. Marcus, Kofi's brother from the orphanage, became the aerospace engineer he had always dreamed of being. He now led a program bringing telescopes to rural African schools. "Kofi taught me to reach for the stars," he would often say in interviews. Amara, the shy girl who once stood quietly beside Kofi, became an internationally celebrated artist. Her paintings on human dignity hung in the Louvre. Her most famous piece was a portrait of Kofi's hands on the day of the incident. Small, steady, refusing to extend. Mrs. Wanjiku, though retired at 75, still visited the orphanage every week. She had seen over 500 children graduate during her career, but always said Kofi taught her that education wasn't just about filling minds with knowledge. It was about filling hearts with courage. Even Trump, at 79 and long out of politics, spent his later years quietly supporting organizations for African veterans. He never spoke about that day, but those close to him knew it had transformed him. He had learned that true power doesn't come from humiliating others, but from lifting them up. Every year, May 18th became International Dignity Day, not by law, but by choice. On that day, people everywhere shared stories of moments when they chose conscience over convenience. In schools, children reenacted Kofi's story, not to glorify defiance, but to learn that everyone faces moments where They must choose between comfort and courage. Psychologists began studying what they called Mangi courage, the way a single act of moral bravery could spark massive social change. Research proved that when people saw others defend their principles, they found the courage to do the same. But the deepest impact was on children growing up with the story as part of their lives. A whole generation learned that their voice mattered, their dignity was non-negotiable, and they had the power to change the world. On a warm May afternoon in 2045, Kofi walked with his daughter through the streets of Nairobi. They passed the old Hope of Africa orphanage, now a modern school with world-class facilities but still a refuge for children learning their worth. In the courtyard under the same baobab tree where Kofi once sat, a teacher told a new group of children the story of the boy who refused to shake hands. Was he a superhero? A little girl asked. No, the teacher smiled. He was a normal boy just like you, but he carried something powerful. He knew who he was, and he never forgot that his dignity was worth more than anything else. Kofi listened, holding his daughter's hand. Daddy, Amara whispered, do I have that power too? Yes, my love, he said softly. Everyone does. They just have to remember to use it. That night, in his study filled with letters from around the world, Kofi began writing his memoirs, not about politics or diplomacy, but about the lessons he had learned from a grandfather who died with a broken heart, but who planted seeds of hope. The book would be called The Words That Changed the World, Lessons in Dignity from a Grandfather to His Grandson. But Kofi knew the real story wasn't in a book. It was alive in every child who refused to be silenced, in every adult who chose to lift others instead of oppress them, in every moment someone dared to do what was right even when it was hard. The story lived, in the words whispered to him in a Nairobi hospital more than 20 years. Earlier, words that had traveled from a dying soldier's heart into millions of others. Never let them make you feel less. That, Kofi realized, was the story that truly mattered. Not the story of kings, presidents, or conquerors, but of ordinary people finding extraordinary courage when it mattered most. The story of human dignity, told one life at a time, one act at a time, one choice at a time. And that story never ends. It continues every day, in every decision, in every act of kindness. In every defense of justice, it continues with you. In memory of Colonel James Mangi, and all those who chose dignity over convenience, courage over fear, and love over hate. Their stories live on, not in years, but in lives changed. Some words never die. They simply wait to be remembered by brave hearts. Never let them make you feel less.